Hey everyone, this is David at Weekend Gamers. This is kind of going to be just a little bit of an off-the-cuff kind of rambling. I'm not really going to edit much on the voice, although you probably see that I've done a lot of other things in the meantime. But the original idea was to kind of talk about some old stories from my role-playing days. But right now I'm kind of struggling. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've all got all the stories up in my head, but it's just how to lay it down in a way that might sort of maybe get people who haven't tried role-playing games before interested in, and that's what I'm kind of struggling with. So I guess one way to do this is maybe start from the beginning and let's just see where it takes us, yeah? So I guess my first experience with role-playing games was back when I was 16. Well, actually no, maybe that isn't entirely true. Now that I think of it, my first experience with role-playing games was probably back when I was sort of 6 or 7 years old. That was my first real experience in the realm of science fiction and fantasy. My dad sat me down one day and showed me these fighting fantasy books by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. And these books, man, I'm not gonna lie, as a 6-year-old kid, these books blew my mind and just opened me up to all these different kind of like worlds. I mean, I was well versed with sort of Transformers and the animated series of Dungeons and Dragons, but I never really knew that there was games where I could which were set in this kind of like world as well that you could play. Now, yeah, I was 6 years old, and yeah, I mean, we had video games and stuff as well, but as far as I knew, that was the only kind of games that there were, and I didn't realise that there was kind of things like this that existed out there. So I think what drew me in straight away was what I was given sort of like a pencil and paper, and I had to make kind of a character. I mean, yeah, granted, it wasn't as anything as involved as modern RPGs, but I was kind of like, as a kid, I'm like, well, make a character? I mean, this was just quite fascinating, actually. I actually had a character in this book, which was my own. I was the hero. This was great. Once I calmed down, my dad began to read out the first pages of what was to be a long relationship with my love of fantasy. So not only was the story being read to me, but I was being given a choice of what my character did next. Now, this I loved. It really made me feel that I was in control of this story. My decision dictated what was going to happen next into the book. This also came with the first lesson and the first realization of these games. My character could die. And die he did. A lot. I mean, when this first happened, I was crushed. How? How can the hero die? He was supposed to save the day, defeat the evil overlord, save the kingdom. How was the possible? How the hell could my hero die? By falling into a pit, by walking down a wrong corridor, or be flattened by a giant worm? But every time I played through the book, I learned. I learned that some monsters were best avoided if given the choice, as I may not have had the correct items to defeat it, or that it wasn't exactly necessary to kill the monster in order to keep the story going. By the way, on a side note, I highly recommend these books, especially if you're looking for an entry game into playing sort of sci-fi or fantasy for yourself, or for somebody else. I mean, these books are great to just pick up and have a quick play, or just to sit there for hours and become completely lost and engrossed in them. So some of them I would recommend is the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, the Citadel of Chaos, the City of Thieves, and my personal favourite, the Forest of Doom. I'm so happy that I still have these books to this day. These battered, old, tattered, worn out, pages falling out, well-read books sit proudly amongst my ever-grown collection. Not only are these classic games, but to me, there's such a piece of nostalgia. Great sentimental pieces of playing these books with my dad. Yeah, I know I sound like I'm overselling these books, and as some of the more cynical kind of person, they might think that I am, remembering these books through rose-tinted nostalgia glasses. Trust me, I'm honestly not. I picked one of these books up a couple of weeks back, and they are still as entertaining to me now as they were when I was a kid. So, skip ahead 10 years, and this was round about when I had my first real experience with pencil and paper role-playing games and the likes of Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I know I've skipped 10 years, but what are you going to do? Those were mostly filled playing video games, which is a story for another time, okay? Anyway, my best friend, and he still is to this day, got his hands on an old copy of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, we had similar tastes in games and such when we were kids, but we never played anything like this. Can't say for certain if Dale did, but I know for a fact that I didn't. Of course, I mean, I was open to this idea completely. It just felt like as I was picking up where I left off with the fighting fantasy books. So, read through the basics, learned the rules, what I needed to know, took a copy of the character sheet, thanks to a photocopier in the college library, and began to create my character. At the time, my best friend was really into his fantasy books, which, I'll admit, I wasn't completely into reading them as a teenager. Well, I wasn't the most studious of kids either. But anyway, He said that he was going to write a campaign based on the novel Magician, written by Raymond E. Feist. Myself and my brother were told to make a character, which was Elf. Well, the mode L to be precise, for those who are familiar with this world. And he went away and began to write the story. So for the first few short beginnings of this campaign, my brother and I used to go over to Dale's house every Monday, play this game for about 4 hours, and it wasn't long until more people in our kind of French circle kind of got interested in what we were doing and eventually got some involved into joining into the group. Now, I'll spare you the details of the campaign. I think I'm dribbling on long enough and I don't want to bore you even further, those who are still with us at this point in the video. So we didn't actually get too involved with the main story arc of Magician. We rarely came across any of the established characters from the story. If we did meet any, it was more like a bit of a cameo, kind of like, like a well-known character in a TV show, coming in for just one episode. So our story was just set before the Rift War got into full swing. For those who are familiar with the story, you know that the war went on for quite some time in the book, as did our campaign to a degree, at least back then when I was 16, it kind of felt like that anyway. We played this campaign for a little over a year. So for a little over a year, we met every Monday for about 4 hours, and within those 4 hours, we escaped into this world. We became those characters. And, I'll admit, I got really attached to my character. I mean, there was one point my character nearly died and I felt devastated. There was no way I was going to start with a new character and stuff. I really, really got attached to this guy. But eventually, the campaign came to an end and it wrapped up, and I was left thinking, well, what now? I did this for a year and my Monday routine was now gone, No more adventures with my character. I kind of felt a bit of a mix of accomplishment and a little bit of sort of sadness. I felt accomplished that my character made it through alive, but I was sad that I had to file the character sheet away and it was, never to be seen again. So I took the next logical step. I began writing. I always fancied sort of doing writing and stuff. I always made like little short stories when I was a kid, so it was kind of, a good opportunity to try. But what would I do next? I didn't really want to do a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. That was already kind of done. So it was around this time I discovered the game Vampire the Masquerade. Role-playing game by White Wolf Publishing. I was fascinated by the world's background. The different types of vampires, the different clans, the secret societies. It gave me so much to play around with. I mean, this was like a dark fantasy game set in the backdrop of a modern world. And it was the idea of how these creatures could survive and hide in today's modern society that I actually found really appealing. Not to sound a hipster or anything, but this was back in the days when vampires were still considered pretty cool and not glittery fairies like we've got today. But anyway, luckily most of the original gaming group was interested and they made some characters. I wrote a few chapters and we got the story started, and within a month I quickly learned my first hard lesson about how to be a good games master, and that was learn how to keep the players invested. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my friends. I really do. But there were times that I really wanted to hit them over the head with a chair. I mean, looking back now, I know quite a lot of the blame was on me. I wasn't making the story interesting enough. I was telling the players to go left without any good reason, only for them to turn right and for me to throw pages of work away. I felt like I was babysitting a group of kids with ADHD that had been fed sherbet or something. I was becoming so frustrated with them. I almost threw the books out in anger. I was starting to feel like playing role-playing games was more of a chore than like an enjoyable activity. Eventually, though, I got to write better stories. People were getting more involved and cared about their characters, but never managed to get that one-year landmark like we originally did on the first campaign. I mean, we did a few short campaigns and one-off stories, but eventually, I brought this game to a close as well, and, we all went out looking for the next kind of game. For a short while, my best mate wrote a campaign for the Wheel of Time role-playing game. This was also at the point where I was reading the actual novels and I jumped to the idea of playing a campaign in this world. Sadly, it didn't last very long for several reasons. It was either not having the time or people dropping in and out, and eventually just got shelved like the rest. I mean, we tried another Raymond D. Feist realm kind of game again, this time based in the city of Crondo. Again, it didn't last long. I think that was the shortest campaign that we did, but that was through nobody's fault. I mean, I bought several games after that, but we're coming at the stage in our lives where we're just more bothered about going out drinking than sitting around a table for a few hours of escapism. New books and games were now just sitting, they're just sitting on my shelf now collecting dust. I mean, come to think of it, I've got a couple of them that still haven't been played to this day. I mean, World of Warcraft RPG for one. Shame as well. I mean, I really like the artwork in it, and it had a pretty good game system. So we're at about the 10-minute mark, and I'm amazed if some of you are still with me at this point. Um, I guess I just really wanted to share a story about something that I really enjoyed doing. You know, I always wanted to try and get other people to at least give these role-playing games a try. You know, if it's not for them, you know, fair play. You know, at least they can say that they're giving it a go. But for those who did enjoy and became long-term gamers, hours of great gaming that was had by all, you know, it's just a really enjoyable activity. It's just a lot of fun to get around with your friends and just get involved into something like this just to escape for a little while. But I'd love to know your stories. What was your first experience with role-playing games or with the Fighting Fantasy books? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of these kind of videos, please hit the subscribe button. My name is David, this is Weekend Gamers saying good night and happy gaming everyone.